thank you for this great opportunity. First of all, I would like to, say that all the words that I heard from Dr. Joanne Roll, the Dean of Business School, Mediger, I think it was very inspirational. And at the onset, the words that we heard from Dr. P.R. Datta, Executive Chair, Center for Business and Economic Research, it has set the stage rolling. And I think this is a great opportunity for me to be here. So, interestingly, I was thinking that we have all been talking about a world. A couple of years back, we spoke of a world which was post-globalization. Then we spoke of recession. Then we talked about possibly the new media and the digitalization happening, innovation, the knowledge economy. Now we have moved on to post-pandemic, endemic. So I think we have seen a whole lot of change. And as we all know that when we talk about change, we have been saying that, change is something which was transformational, rapid. And in the last change that we have seen across the last 5 years has been much more rapid than we have ever witnessed. So it is a kind of a wake-up call for many of us. When I chose this topic of a framework for well-being advocacy, what came to my mind is during these most turbulent times of the pandemic, the world has realized how interconnected we are, how the economies are interdependent on each other, whether be it the war crisis or the pandemic or the oil crisis. So I would be talking about this contemporary geopolitical and economic, upheaval that we are seeing. It is in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. So if you look at the, typically, if you look at the way the world is changing, now if you look at the overall most important salient aspects which are very critical today are the geopolitics, which is emphasizing on the peace, on stability, and who other than us at this time in this particular 11th conference, we can understand the impact that it has created in the world market, what it is doing to the businesses, how businesses are operating in the world. The second other important area that I see is very important is the medical diplomacy. We need to understand that if a very good example has been the example of even how vaccines were, when it was being manufactured and how different countries got together to help each other. So I think today we are not only going to see diplomacy in the area of politics, but I think we are going to see diplomacy even in the area of education and medical diplomacy. Then strengthening the BRIC alliance. If you see almost 50% of the world population, you will see in the BRIC countries. And the way these alliances are coming together in terms of a BRICS forum, you will see that there is a huge impact in the way education is happening in that part of the world, how the e-commerce has been in parts of the BRIC countries. At the Amity University, Gurugram in India here, we have a Center for BRIC Studies, and we are looking at the practice, research, and outreach impact that has been created in the world, especially in this particular zone. Then another very important area that we are looking at is the energy security. That the world over, people are talking, and we are seeing that how this needs to be conserved, how we need to understand and share. Then we are looking at when I'm talking about energy, I would also like to highlight on the renewable part of the energy, because one of the things that we are looking at, people are talking about how we can interconnect the world, and every part of the world has sunshine at some part during the day. So can we have a common grid across the world and have a lot of renewable energy? Then a mix of energy. Then, of course, creating the SDGs, the 17 goals, we are looking at creating an inclusive world. I think today is the hour when it is extremely critical and important to identify and understand how and where we are going in terms of these 17 goals in the different countries. The growth of emerging technology and industry power. I think this is another very important aspect that's going to have an impact on the economy, where we are talking about having the power of, say, the Fortune 100 countries, companies. And if you look at the kind of companies which are looking at these aspects, how they interact with the sustainability focus, how they understand the energy concept, how they're looking at the environment on the whole. So I think the large industries worldwide would have a very big role to play in the next couple of years. And finally, I think the education part. So I really want to compliment the entire organizers of this kind of a conference, where you have brought in so many important, eminent thinking minds together, and who can impact the lives of the others around them in their own countries, in their higher learning institutions, in their K-12 schools. So one of the things that I thought I will share with you is how can we win through sustainability. So global policy deliberations have been striving towards adopting the best practices through counseling, mentoring, imparting value-based education, through enhancement of individual and community resilience, optimism, and well-being. I think that we need to see a huge change that is taking place in the value-based education worldwide. So how do you bring in well-being values into the mainstream? Here I want to mention that this year G20 summit, which is taking place in Indonesia, and in the month of October, there is also a Values 20 summit, which is undergoing, for which I am also there part of the Wellbeing Advisory. So where we are trying to see how we can formulate a model and which can be replicated in different countries, and how there can be learning so that people understand the importance of overall mental, physical, and holistic health for people, and primarily for the youth of the countries, so that we can see a better changed world in future. So if you look at this kind of a crisis that, the entire world is reeling, we have been all talking about energy crisis, we've been talking about environmental climate change, and climate change and well-being are very closely connected to each other. Because if you see the impact that climate change has on the livelihood of women is also very interesting. So it has also a gender connect to it. Very recently, I was speaking at the Indian Institute of Rural Management on the World Water Day, and we saw the kind of crisis that is happening due to the climate change, the flash floods, the kind of glaciers melting, the way the temperatures are rising. Even in the few degrees, even a 1 degree temperature rise is going to create a huge havoc in the world. So the financial implication in India specifically, if you look at the financial impact, is related risk is estimated to be INR 3,285 billion by Indian companies responding to the CDP. So here, what is this CDP that we are talking about? Very interestingly, even in today's economic times, you will see that some of the companies in India who have agreed and who are at the list A of the disclosure, climate disclosure post-pandemic, which is, you will see countries like, companies like ACC Limited and Tech Mahindra and Infosys Limited and many more, who have created councils within the corporate, strategic forces within the companies to identify and disclose related to increased in climate disclosure. And this is something which is, I think, a great sign where you are committed to the environmental health and the way it is impacting the world today. So the equity and climate justice remain India's top priority in terms of government formulation, policy, enforcement, compliance, and mechanisms. So this really tells us that this is not just happening in India. This is the kind of story that you're going to see in different large developing nations. So I think there is, and I think I would also want to put on record that green alliance between United Kingdom and India is something which is worth mentioning here, that in terms of creating better energy efficiency, I think India and UK have aligned together to work on this area. So I think these are some of the great case studies and success stories that will tell us a lot about what we can do in the world today and how can we win with sustainability. So when I talk about sustainability, one aspect that people can see are the environmental temperature rise. But what you cannot see, but you can feel the impact is on your mental health and well-being. And that in turn impacts the productivity of people in organizations. You know, very interestingly, there are models now which has been built across the world to even see how you feel well inside a built space, that within an environment, how, you know, sustainable aesthetics can be implied in a built environment. So more and more companies, not only in the real estate, but people have understood that it is important to create that well-being is going to be a very important area, that the government would bring it into the policy level. So addressing the challenge of well-being by creating policy framework and instilling optimism should encourage integrated approach at the national and global levels in an inclusive manner. So that's what I call it, the 7 sense, the optimism. And there, if you look at, I'll give you an example that how do we take it to the K-12 schools, that this can be applied to the millions of youth studying in the K-12 schools and colleges and universities to create long-term impact in transforming their lives through value-based pedagogy. So I think how there could be a seamless integration between K-12 schools to higher learning institutions is through the value-based pedagogy, which is also going to have a lot of impact. So along with the other skills and competencies that individuals are learning, value-based pedagogy are going to create better leaders for tomorrow. In this very interesting initiative by Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan is inspired by the vision of transformational change in rural developmental process by leveraging knowledge institutions to help build the architecture of inclusive India. So again, keeping this as an example in the world market, you will also see that how this kind of impact that you can create in the rural area will have a lot of impact elsewhere. We have, in fact, a very interesting center, Center of Excellence, Mohammed Yunus Center, who is a Nobel laureate and who is also really working for social entrepreneurship. We have seen that working, a case study where we have seen that working with villages around the university, where we could come out with ideas related to, solar, how you can use solar installation as a better source of energy. We have looked into psychonutrition, psychobiotics, health in general. So that way, there are many initiatives which can be brought to the rural world and also help them in social entrepreneurship. Working with the Skill India mission, working with the skill sectors, a lot of rural women are being trained in the area of apparel. So what happens is you are creating a better and a more stable economy when you look at the bottom of the pyramid, when you look at what is happening in the suburban belts of the country. So I thought this would be something that we can really look at that can be done. And very interestingly, when one looks at that what is happening in a typical rural areas or the suburban belts, unfortunately, in spite of the slow growth in other ways, but there has been a substantial growth of addiction. So de-addiction programs is also something which is very interesting and that can be really looked at where you can improve the health of the people in general. So such a program is really committed towards creating a better wellness in the society, creating a better well-being within the people of the country. So through the recommendations, let me say that when I talk about winning with sustainability, that one has to not only believe in it, but one needs to create some actionable items that how do you go ahead? What do you really do? So leaders can take up these challenges by enhancing this global well-being, by focusing and strengthening institutional framework. So you need to do it at all levels. You need to do at the policy level, by the policymakers of the government. You need to work with the higher learning institutions. You need to work with the skill framework that is already available. You need to work with the entrepreneurs. You need to, today we have seen a huge revolution that has taken place in the technology. So if you look at fintech companies, edutech companies, and any tech companies coming in, you will see the way this can be used as a platform, because platform businesses are going to thrive. The economy will get a lot of returns from a platform-based business. So I think how can each government within their own policies adopt such practices, the holistic well-being on a sustainable basis, and in compliance with the United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals, so that youth can be empowered to face global challenges. I think that's the story. You need to create more resilient human beings for the tomorrow. We are going to see a lot of, this whole era. I feel that this whole era from 2020 that we're going to see is going to be a very disruptive world. So you don't need to just keep on training them. You need to make them lifelong learners. You need to create better resilient workforce. So keeping that in mind, I think policies need to be developed and developed. So the G20 leaders need to adopt an institutional collaborative approach by creating Global Sustainable Wellbeing Secretariat. So this is a kind of a recommendation that I personally feel, and we are working on some of the projects which really point out that unless you create a framework, you are not able to implement what you would like to implement. At the same time, educators have all the freedom. They have all the flexibility to carry out research in this field. So I see more and more multicultural, research that can happen on real time, thanks to the kind of internet era, the digital era that we have entered, and people can create centers of excellence within higher learning institutions and work on such matters together. We can have a lot of large funded projects who would like to work in this kind of an area. So creating this would be a really interesting roadmap to create a better and a happier world. So with these words, I would like to say that we are seeing a very different times, but at the same time, we are seeing a great change that is going to happen in the world. We are going to see a lot of, productivity that will come. So when we look at world now, we will see that people are now more flexible. People are ready to adopt to the change. People are ready to connect. People are ready to collaborate. So the kind of rigidity that was there a couple of years back, even to go online, has suddenly disappeared. So I think there were these long walls which were built around us is slowly disappearing. It didn't disappear with the globalization. It did disappear with the recession, but it is disappearing because of the power of the human mind, the power of the thought that we have, and the power that the youth can have. India being a very young nation, I think we are really looking at, it is also a challenge that how do you create better youth for a productive country like India, and the similar things through collaborations, how different countries can come together and help each other so that we can have a better world around us. So with these words, I convey my gratitude, and I'm really looking forward for this two-day conference and lots to gain. So all the eminent panelists, it was a wonderful to have you listening to some of my thoughts. And at the same time, to the live audience out there, although we can't see you, but we can really feel you. And I'm sure this will have a long way to go. These 2 days of the conference would be really memorable, and we will create a roadmap around it. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll be happy.